Let's return to our tank with welded barrel. The second reason why test firing a welded barrel on a tank won't identify the best ammunition is everything else related to the barrel. Imagine that manufacturer provide us with two absolutely identical barrels, and we ignore the ruined harmonics of the welded barrel. The analytics for the welded barrel's ammunition won't be valid for the other barrel because it might be on the opposite side of quality distribution curve. Another question is what type of rifle we will use. Bolt-action rifles are considered more accurate because they don't have a gas block hole in the barrel, which reduces accuracy by about 15%. Also, they don't have a bolt moving during the shot, which is more noticeable in piston-driven rifles, especially in AKs and the X716. Generally, they don't have bullet deformation issue during chambering or the problem of cartridges in the magazine shifting seating depths due to recoiling. This seating issue is especially noticeable with high-power cartridges. Even among bolt-action rifles there are differences. For example, the rigidity of the chamber with the bolt. Large cuts negatively affect the stiffness of the bolt, which in turn impacts the accuracy. The same applies to the connection between the barrel and the bolt, as well as the quality of the bedding. During our abstract testing, the barrel burns out, meaning the rifling erodes. For instance, hot-loaded 2-3 round with velocity of 4,200 feet per second can burn out a barrel so badly that after just 500 shots you start see keyholing on a target. Even if the barrel itself doesn't wear out, the chamber does, increasing the bullet jump to the barrel. Incidentally, in the SVD, the bullet jump is so significant that the bullet would have to be seated past the case mouth to touch the rifling. Since we have mentioned the SVD, it is worth discussing its rudimentary chrome lining. Chrome is typically applied to machine gun barrels, especially when the budget doesn't allow for more expensive materials like stellite. Chrome does indeed increase barrel life under high temperature conditions, but it comes with its downsides. Chromium plating is applied over another metal, and it cannot be applied perfectly, which leads to a reduction in accuracy by 25 to 50%. When the chromium layer wears off, firecracking appears. Through these cracks, hot gases with corrosive propellant acids penetrate inside and start corroding under the chrome. As a result, whole flakes of chrome can peel off, and accuracy decreases even further. After this, the barrel becomes unsuitable for precision shooting and may only be repurposed for less demanding uses. Additionally, barrel wear can have positive effects on accuracy due to the barrel break-in factor. It's evident that a barrel can accumulate significant internal stress from being rifled by mandrel or struck by 1,000-ton press during cold hammer forging. And factory stress relief might be insufficient, so a few hundred rounds need to be fired to settle everything down. Although in theory you could wait 20 years and the stress would dissipate on its own. These were all factory-related factors, meaning those we cannot directly influence. Now let's move on to the things that we can control. There is also a second break-in process for very old rifles. On worn barrels with cavern or pits, the rifling is no longer ideal. After cleaning, the bullet may wobble if being scratched by sandpaper, which can cause gas blow-by behind the bullet. However, after about 100 shots, a layer of copper and carbon seems to smooth out these pits and scratches, allowing the bullet to fly more steadily. Nevertheless, barrel fouling is still detrimental and negatively impacts accuracy, especially if you are shooting bullets with plastic tip. For better explanation, check out this video. The barrel can also bend during use, or even due to military specifications. Additionally, it can simply heat up from firing, and very hot barrel changes its rigidity parameters, thus altering its harmonics. Once the barrel cools down, something called crocodile skin might appear, which can also slow down the bullets. Surprisingly, this also negatively affects accuracy. A rifle owner who hasn't controlled every stage of manufacturing won't be able to find or distinguish an accurate barrel from an inaccurate one without shooting it. They might only identify obvious defects, such as chipped crown or an asymmetrical muzzle, or rifling that veers off course. For example, my barrel crown is intact, and rifling is also fine, but the gas block port already shows sign of 2,000 shots. Interestingly, barrel wears is often assessed by looking at the gas block port, because the barrel doesn't wear down, like wood on the carpenter plane, and the bullet is in the chisel. Rather, the bullet acts on an abrasive, and the barrel erodes with each shot due to high temperature erosion. Having covered the internal surface, let's move on to the external one. The next technical aspect is torque. For example, there is a story about SVD being over-torqued in 3 places from the factory, where the barrel connects to the receiver, near the front side, and at the gas block. There is also a story that the well-known Belgian brand FN, Fabrique Nationale, supplied their SCAR rifles with over-torqued muzzle brakes, which degraded accuracy about 4 times. Finally, we have reached the subject of my video, the ammunition. Different ammunition manufacturers have their techniques, methods, tolerances and storage conditions for their product.
Смотря какой fabric, смотря откуда приходит fabric, смотря сколько details в этом.
This ammunition might be stored differently in a store, at the shooter's home, or even during the hunting. For example, a wet or dirty cartridge could cause the rifle to explode. All of these factors also influence the stability and accuracy of the ammunition. Even the bullet itself has a varying center of gravity, which cannot be determined without ruining it. Therefore, in practice, we cannot be 100% sure that the bullet will land exactly where the previous one from the batch hit. Ideally, besides just reloading, it is necessary to additionally sort and trim bullets. Much-grade bullets should actually be manufactured in environments as clean as those used for producing electronic microchips. Even tiny particles of foraging matter on the core or the inner surface of the jacket can be enough to cause a fire in a group, which could lead to losing a competition. Lastly, I would place optic as the easiest factor to improve. MDT also conducted a check on this factor, and in the early stages their accuracy even improved, but this was likely due to a low round count. So if we group everything, we have the following. But this was just the beginning. Let's move on to the second factor, which we can call the human factor. This is the most volatile and therefore more important than the others, but it can be relatively easily and quickly improved with a quality practice. However, the parameter of average deviation is still limited about 1.2 MOA, meaning not all the shooters can even aim with 1.5 MOA. Don't believe it? Try it yourself. Taking any target and try aiming to a dry fire, staying within the corresponding 1.5 MOA for your distance for at least 4 seconds. Not everyone can do this, especially while also smoothly working the trigger. Просто целюсь. Натискаю. The next factor we can call natural. When shooting up to 50 meters, it's so insignificant that can be completely ignored, but after 100 meters and with each additional 100 meters, it has such strong impact that the first 2 accuracy factors can be disregarded. With each meter, the bullet loses speed, which causes it to be more affected by the wind drift, and deviates further from its trajectory, and all the way until it slows down to the speed of sound. So if the shooter misreads the wind direction, the bullet will drift exponentially away from the target. Even if they buy an expensive weather station and know the wind speed and direction down to tenths near themselves, the wind at the target could be completely opposite. In that case, it might be necessary to adjust the turret in the wrong direction, as demonstrated in this video. Plus, there is effect of spin drift or Magnus effect. For example, if the rifle twists clockwise, the bullet will drift to the right. That's why the SVD scope is mounted slightly to the left of the barrel to compensate for this effect. The final natural factor is rain, which essentially borders to the next factor, luck. A single small raindrop can cause the bullet to rotate to a significant angle of attack and result a flyer outside the group. How far the flyer goes depends on the site of the drop and where it hits the bullet. But why is the effective range of a shot determined by a distance at which the bullet speed is greater than the speed of sound? Let's start with the basics. What is the speed of sound? The speed of sound is the speed at which sound waves travel through a medium. Its value is expressed in Mach, named after physics Ernst Mach. 1 Mach is approximately 340 meters per second at sea level, or 295 meters per second at an altitude of 11 kilometers. As an object approaches its shock wave, sound expands. The sound has more difficulty dissipating, creating a compression jump, shock wave, also known as a Mach cone. But reaching and surpassing is quite difficult. In aviation, this effect is called flutter. The air there becomes almost solid, meaning the physics of the process change. We can imagine the bullet as if it's piercing the thin layer of rubber. After slowing down to this threshold, the projectile no longer flies, but essentially falls with unpredictable trajectory. It may hit the target tail first or even spin backward due to centrifugal force. Bullets with higher ballistic coefficients endure this effect better. That's why a long-range cartridge isn't necessarily the most accurate, and an accurate cartridge isn't necessarily large. Otherwise, Formula 1 or speed records would be set by beloved trucks. And even if you are lucky enough to hit a distant target, it's no guarantee that you will have enough energy to take it down, as everyone has their own threshold of durability. For example, a determined individual might keep going even with 10 bullet holes, not to mention natural ones. Accurate shooting can be imagined as a math equation, where each stage has its own coefficient of importance. So at initial stages, 90% shooter, 10% the rifle. Once all the skills and experience are there, it's opposite. At working distances, 50-50. Everything beyond the effective range is just luck. At the same time, I don't undermine the current record for longest shot to hit a live target by Ukrainian Vyacheslav Kovalsky at almost 2 miles. On the contrary, I pointed out that it's incredibly difficult and requires exceptional preparations. As I say, those who want to become millionaires rarely do, and those who don't want to never will. By the way, there is even a channel where they shot almost a kilometer, sometimes with very expensive rifles, but they only hit about once every 30 shots.